Okay, so this is a quick video tutorial on how to use our solder stenciling machine to get solder onto the PCB business cards. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that your space is set up appropriately. So right now you can see that the lights are a little dim in here, and so in order to turn on the overhead white lights, we're going to go to the far wall next to the office door, find the big white PCB, and we're just going to touch it 1 or 2 times to make it go to the white light mode. All right. So we can see that we've got much better lighting in here. That's going to be important because we're going to want to be able to see that the solder is getting on the PCBs correctly. At this point then, we want to kind of start to begin to gather our materials together. We want to take note of where we're getting these materials because it's going to be very important that when we clean up, that we get everything put back in its appropriate place so the next group is going to be able to find it. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we've got our painter's tape. That just hangs right here. We're also going to want to grab our stencils and our printed circuit boards. So those are going to be located right here. So we can see that there's a box called business cards. There's a piece of metal, that's our metal stencil. Underneath the business card component bucket are going to be all the business cards in this. So we can go ahead and pull this out. It's very heavy. But we have all the classes business cards in here. Don't pull the entire bucket out, it's too heavy for that. But go ahead and find your business cards and then you can pull those out for the scope of this activity. So, we'll go ahead and grab the stencil. I'm going to put these components back. And we'll bring that on over here. Next thing we're going to need is our solder paste. Our solder paste is kept in this little refrigerator. So we're going to come over here and we're going to grab it. So it's generally the one that's in the very front is the newest and freshest. When I close this, I want to make sure that that door closes completely. Sometimes it slides around and doesn't close. While I'm here, I'm also going to grab the isopropyl alcohol. We'll be using that for cleanup a little bit later on. Okay. At this point, I'm also going to need a tongue depressor and a spreader. Those are going to be located over here in the soldering bucket. So, tongue depressor is just an oversized popsicle stick, and the spreader are these black plastic spreaders that you see here. Close that back up. Okay, so at that point, I am ready to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one of my business cards, and I'm going to slot it in on these holders that are here on the solder pasting tool. There's these 4 little nubs that kind of poke up, and what we're going to do is we're going to position our business card so it kind of snaps into place, and it doesn't wiggle around very much. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my solder paste stencil. I'm going to make sure that I kind of get it oriented on. And what I want to do is to kind of slide this around and make sure that all the tiny little holes in the stencil line up with the tiny little silver pads on the business card. This is going to allow the solder paste to go through it and only onto the tiny silver pads. So it's going to take a moment to kind of orient yourself and kind of get it lined up just so. Okay. And once you feel that you've got it in a good spot, what we're going to do is we're going to take our painter's tape. And I'm going to tear off a good little bit. I'm going to kind of put in this first amount. Make sure it actually lines up correctly again if you bump it. There we go. And kind of lay that into place. And then I'm going to do that for all 4 sides. So we'll go ahead and tape the bottom. And as you're doing this, you want to make sure that you get the stencil as flat as you possibly can. That'll make sure that there's no, big gaps that would allow the solder paste to kind of blob up a bit. All right, nice and flat and straight. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our solder paste. Now, solder paste is very special, so it's very expensive, and so we want to use kind of the least amount as possible while still making sure that we get good coverage on our stencil. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Okay, you can see that it's got a nice liquidy, kind of creamy texture to it. It's also really important that when we're done, we seal this up really well. And I'm going to take my popsicle stick, and I'm going to kind of reach in and grab, about this much, not an enormous amount. It doesn't take all that much. And I'm going to kind of spread it a little bit over where my 7 kind of holes for LEDs are, and a little bit right where the button is. We're not going to be doing the battery part of the stencil. It's the part that has the circle with the kind of the 2 big squares. That's going to be done later on by hand. Once I'm kind of done with that solder paste, I'm going to scrape off all the excess into the jar. And I'm going to kind of close it up nice and tight. It's always good to get a little bit less. You can always add more later on if you run out. But again, it's very expensive, so we do want to kind of make sure that we conserve it as much as possible. So at this point, I am ready to begin the stenciling process. So I'm going to take my scraper, and I'm going to kind of hold it at a relatively low angle like this. And I'm going to kind of gently scrape the paste across these holes, both for both the button and for the LEDs. So I'm going to scrape like that, and then I'm going to kind of push and kind of scrape it off. So that's actually kind of clean now. Same thing over here. I'm going to kind of scrape across and then scrape off. So most of the solder paste now is actually on the scraper. At this point then, I can actually lift this up, remove the business card, and kind of inspect to make sure that in fact solder paste did get on all those tiny little silver spots. Again, we're not going to be doing this battery area right here. We're just going to be doing the LEDs here and the button here. At that point then, I can kind of put over here, and that's going to go onto our assembly stage. And then I can lift this up. I can replace a new business card underneath here. And when I lay this down, it should be perfectly lined up again. I can then take my solder paste on my scraper, scrape it across again and again, lift, pull out, and repeat. And so through this process, you're going to be able to create a lot of business cards that have solder paste on them that are ready for the assembly step. Now, once you get done here, you're still probably going to have a little bit of excess solder paste, and we need to do a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to talk about the cleanup process. So to do that, what we're going to do is I'm going to place my spreader here. Try not to place the spreader down anywhere over here, gets the solder paste all over the place. Then I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to grab my solder paste. I'm going to open it up again. I'm going to grab my pasting tool, and I'm going to scrape any of that excess paste back into the bucket. I want to make sure it goes actually in the bucket, not on the sides. And so you can see I'm kind of just scraping it all back in. Again, every little bit counts. Okay, so once you've gotten almost all the paste off of that, we are going to close this up. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. And then we're going to start to do a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to take off the tape of my stencil. Okay, I'm going to throw this away. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to get myself some lint-free rags. So those are located underneath the refrigerator here. I'm going to grab two. I'm going to lay one out nice and flat on this table here. Okay. I'm going to grab my solder stencil, lay it down nice and flat. I'm going to take my isopropyl alcohol, pop it open. I'm going to squirt a little bit onto my second one, and I'm going to very gently rub all that solder paste off of this stencil. Okay, so you can see it comes up a little bit. I'm then going to flip it over and actually do the same on this side. So just nice and flat against this. So now this stencil is nice and clean. I'm going to take my popsicle stick, I'm going to wipe it off, make sure that it's nice and clean as well. Very good. And last, I'm going to take my solder paste spreader and make sure that it's nice and clean as well. So at that point then, I've got my area cleaned up. I'm going to wad this up. I'm going to take this and also just make sure that I kind of wipe down any excessive solder paste that built up. And now I'm ready to throw this away and put my tools away. So putting things back in reverse. So I've got my popsicle stick and my spreader. That's going to go back in the soldering tools bucket. I'm going to make sure that I cap the isopropyl alcohol, and it's going to go right back with those tools. I'm then going to take my stencil and my solder paste. I'm going to put the stencil back on top of the business cards parts bucket. I'm going to open up the refrigerator to make sure that it actually closes down all the way, and then put my isopropyl alcohol just right next to that refrigerator. So that's how we're going to do our business cards and do our stenciling on it. So again, you won't do this cleanup until long after you've done all your business cards, but you do want to make sure that it gets done We don't want that solder paste to get dried, and we definitely don't want to leave a mess for the next group. That's it. Okay, so this is a quick video tutorial on how to do the assembly step of the business card activity. So this does presume that you have some business cards that already have the solder paste that was put on in the previous step. And so now we want to get our area set up so that we can have all the right tools and materials in order to actually put some components on these boards. So first thing, obviously, I've got some boards that have solder paste on them. I've also got one of these silicone mats that's nice and easy to work on. It doesn't slip around very much. And you'll notice that I've got a lit magnifying glass. That'll help me kind of look at these really tall, small components that we're going to be using in a moment. But there's a few more things that we're going to need. So first of the things that we need some tweezers. Those are going to be located here in the soldering bucket. So I'm going to open that up and I'm going to grab a set of tweezers that has the safety cap on it. While I'm here, I'm also going to grab a few of these little plastic condiment cups. These are really good for holding lots of those tiny components that we're going to be using in just a moment. So I'll close that up. Let's go ahead and go find some components. So if I come over here, down below, there's going to be one of these buckets that says business cards on it. And so this has all the business card components that we'll need. And in here, we're going to find a couple things. So first, we're going to find some buttons. So I'm going to take a pinch of buttons and place them in one of my condiment cups. Over here, what I'm also going to notice is that I have a choice of white or pink LEDs. Now, you can choose, either one that you so like, but you can't mix different color LEDs on the same business card. So if you choose white, that's fine. You can do a business card that has all white. Even on the next business card, you could choose one that has all pink. You just have to keep them separate. Don't put them in the same condiment cup and don't put them on the same business card. That actually won't work out too well. So I'm going to choose some pink LEDs. So I'm going to grab a small pinch of those. And a small pinch goes pretty far. And so I'm going to close that back up, place my condiment cup here on my silicone mat, and I'm going to place these back. Okay, now I'm ready to begin placing some components. The first thing to keep in mind is that the LEDs are polarized, meaning that there is a plus side and a negative side, a positive and a negative. And so it's going to be really important that you figure out what the orientation is. Now on these LEDs, what's kind of nice is when you look at them underneath the magnifying glass, you will see that one side has a small kind of green edge on it, and that green means ground. And so that's going to help you kind of, identify which side is the negative or the minus side. That's going to be the one that has the little green marking on top. Now, when we place it on our business card, we also have to make sure that that ground is going to the ground of the business card. And what you'll notice is on the business card, underneath the tiny little hackberries on it, you'll see a tiny black dot underneath one of the silver pads. That also indicates ground. And so I'm going to make sure that I've got the little green side there. I'm using even the magnifying glass inside this magnifying glass to identify that. I'm then going to line it up with that very particular pad and kind of apply a little bit of gentle pressure to it to make sure that it sticks to that pad. Okay, so we're going to do that for all of our components, and so you'll just go one by one, kind of identify what side is green, line it up with that tiny little dot, make sure that it sticks on those two solder pads, and apply some gentle pressure, and you'll repeat that for all 7 LEDs. Now at this point then, we're going to grab one of our buttons, and we'll notice that on the buttons that it has 4 little legs that are sticking out. What's nice about buttons is it doesn't matter if you kind of have it 180 degrees rotated or not. They are not polarized. We just have to make sure that those tiny little legs are in fact touching the 4 little solder pads on our PCB. So I'm going to kind of place that in here. Again, gently press down, and this business card is ready to go once you've placed all those components. We're not going to be placing the battery holders at this time. We're going to be doing those by hand a little bit later on, so we'll get to that in just a little bit. But at this point, this board is ready to be solder reflowed. And so you'll want to kind of transport it gently. Again, if you tip it over, if you drop it, those parts are going to come off. And so as you're moving these, please do so gently so that you don't lose those components. Once you have those all done up and you're ready to clean up at the end of the day, let's go ahead and talk about some cleanup. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and get that component box. And I'm going to bring it back here. And I'm going to replace my components, and it's very important that we make sure that the right components get back in the right box. So I'm going to very gently return my buttons to the button. I've got some spare LEDs. I'm going to kind of tap them down so they all kind of make a small pile here. And then I'm going to very gently tap them. Make sure you get all of them, they're very small, back into the pink bucket because I got some pink LEDs. Okay, at this point I can stack my condiment cups, place them back into our soldering tools bucket. I'm going to take my tweezers, I'm going to grab that little cover, it's very important, otherwise it ruins the tweezers. I'm going to cover it up, place that back in the soldering tools bucket. Okay. And then I'm going to return the components back to the shelf that I found them on. Okay, and at that point, I am done with my assembly and I'm ready to move on to the next step. And that's it. Okay, so this is a quick video tutorial on how to use our T962 PCB reflow oven. So to get started, a couple things that you're going to need. We'll need our reflow oven, obviously. We'll also need several of our boards that have been already had solder paste and components placed on them. So I've found that this can do about 6 boards at a time. And so you'll need to kind of have that certain amount of boards ready to go in order to make the best use of your time. We're also going to need our heat glove just in case things get a little bit too toasty for us. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to reach around and we're going to find the big power switch and we're going to go ahead and flip that on. Now at that point we have several options in this menu. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to select the correct temperature wave. So we're going to hit F3. At that point, we'll see that this starts off with wave 1. We're looking for wave 4. So to advance ahead, we'll hit F1. That's wave 2, wave 3, wave 4 is what we're looking for. At that point then, we can hit F4 to say OK. Okay, we'll hit it one more time. And we're going to hit F4 to go to English menu. And then now we can select the temp wave auto execute. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and open up this tray. Okay, we're going to very carefully place our PCB in the oven, okay, and we can add additional PCBs. Like I said, we can fit about 6 up into here. You don't want them to be right on top of each other. You do want the air to be able to kind of move around them. As you place them in, be careful about not tipping them. We don't want the parts to fall off. Also be careful about running your fingers into the components. We don't want to accidentally knock anything off or to disturb them. Okay, so once we've placed those in, we kind of spread them apart. And kind of gently place these, push that drawer back in, and then we can go ahead and hit F1. Okay, and that's going to begin the process. So we can see that the lamp, that means the infrared lamp, the heat source, has turned on. It's going to start heating up, and you'll be able to track the progress. There's a little tick mark that will take you through this entire curve. This program takes about 6 to 7 minutes to run, and so while this is cooking, you can be working on other parts of your design process as well. So we're going to go ahead and let this cook, and then we'll inspect the results when we're done in a moment. All right, so we can tell that it is finished. In order to stop the process, once it starts beeping, we can hit the S button and hold it down in order to stop. Now you can see that it did have a cooldown cycle, but we shouldn't presume that that meant that it cooled down all the way to where it's very safe to touch. So we're going to go ahead and open these guys up. Okay, I'm going to grab my glove. And we can begin to remove and inspect all of our cards. So, pull each one out. Again, they're not super duper hot, but still a little bit kind of too hot to the touch. Okay, and we can kind of go through and look to make sure that we do in fact have good solid joints all the way around. This one's looking good. So we can remove, and we can load up our next batch and keep cooking. Now, once you're done, you can go ahead and remove your glove. We're going to go ahead and hang that back up on the wall in its place. And then we'll reach around on the back side and we'll flip off that power button and we'll be done for the day. And that's it. Okay, so this is a quick video tutorial on how to complete the business card activity. So for this, we're going to be hand soldering on our battery holder. So to do that, you're going to need some boards that already have your LEDs and your button soldered on from the reflow oven. We're going to go ahead and get some tools and some components. So we're going to reach over here and we're going to grab ourselves a set of pliers. We're also going to grab down from the business cards parts bucket several of our battery holders. So they're these little silver shiny ones. So you'll need several of these. We're going to put that back. We're going to need some solder. So we can kind of pull some out here, a brass sponge, and then our soldering iron. So to get started, we'll go ahead and turn on our soldering iron. So we'll reach in the back and we will flip this little switch and pick up the soldering iron and wiggle it to kind of make it turn on. We also are going to make sure that we have our, this is a very specific soldering tip on it, so it's not a pointed one. It's more of a wedge shape. And so to get started, we're going to let our soldering iron heat up all the way. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of our solder and we're going to flood this circular area right here. So in the center, I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm just going to kind of apply a good bit of solder and kind of move it around so it's got a nice little bulge right there. That's going to make contact with our battery. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our pliers and our battery holder. And I'm going to take one of the tiny little edges on this battery holder and I'm going to just bend it upward slightly. That's going to make it a little bit easier to get into our board. And so I'm going to take this with this little edge. See this guy right there pointing towards the outside. I'm going to hook in this edge over here and kind of bend and snap it in. So this way it kind of holds itself on its own. I'm then going to flip the board over and grab my soldering iron. And then I'm going to apply a generous amount of solder to both of these tabs on the other side. Again, we don't want this to be kind of coming out. Okay. Okay, get it nice and that wedge tip really helps kind of cover it. Okay, we can place that back up. Okay, now at this point we are ready to test it. So we're going to reach into this drawer right here and grab several of our batteries. And we'll want this to cool down for just a second, but we can kind of open this up and put our battery inside. And when we do, we can go ahead and push that button and give a test and make sure that all of our LEDs are lighting up. If they don't, again, you can kind of spend a little bit of time trying to debug, make sure all your solder joints are okay, make sure your LEDs are on correct or your battery's in the correct orientation. But once you've finished up with this station, we're going to do a couple things to kind of get cleaned up. So the first thing is we're going to reach back here, we're going to turn off our soldering iron. Okay, we're going to wind up our solder. Okay, and we're going to take our pliers and put them back in our soldering tools bucket. We'll take any excess batteries that we have and place them back in the battery drawer. And then we'll take any excess battery holders that we have and put them back in the business cards component box and place that back in its place. And at that point, you'll be done with soldering up your business cards and testing them out. And that's it.